Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today talking with my guest because it's a topic that we don't often talk about. And so we're going to have so much fun delving into this. So please join me in welcoming Rusty Gaillard to the program today. Welcome, Rusty. How are you doing?
I am great, Deb. Very happy to be here with you today.
Perfect. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we'll just jump in. So former worldwide director of finance at Apple, Rusty Gaillard followed a traditional corporate path to success from GE under Jack Welch, an MBA at Stanford, to 14 years at Apple. And I also noticed on your website, you say that you were schooled as a rocket scientist, you play in a rock band, and you are dad of the year, of course. But, you have all of those qualifications, but you left the corporate world in 2019 to help other executives achieve success without the sacrifice. Rusty is a sought-after speaker and author of the best-selling book, Breaking the Code. Stop looking for answers and start enjoying life. He lives in Silicon Valley with his wife and 15-year-old son, enjoys playing bass in a rock band, and spends as much time as possible outside. So again, Rusty, welcome.
Thank you, Deb. Very kind introduction.
Well, I always love to hear a little bit about how my guests got to where they are today. And you have had quite the impressive career path. But tell us a little bit more about how it is that you got to where you are today.
Well, so you alluded to it a little bit in the introduction, which is this kind of what I would call this very traditional corporate path. Mm-hmm. So if you rewind all the way back into my high school days, I did well in school. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, came reasonably easily to me. And so I was an A student. Mm-hmm. And it kind of set the trajectory for the next 20 odd years of my life. I went to a great college. Mm-hmm. My first job was at General Electric when Jack Welch was CEO. Back in those days, it was the premier company. Mm-hmm. If you look at what's going on today, it's breaking up into multiple different companies. But back then, it was on top of the world. Mm-hmm. So I was always striving to be the best and do the best and excel in my role and work at the best companies and so on. And that's really the path that I followed. So I left GE to go to business school at Stanford. That brought me to California. I ended up working at Apple. I became director of finance there for worldwide finance, and I led the global sales forecast for Apple, how much of all the different products we're going to sell. I was there for 14 years. I started before the iPhone was announced, and I left.
You had what was the little guy?
The iPod.
That was it. And I have one of those. Yep, iPod. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so when I started, the iPod was the hit product. And obviously then that transitioned to the phone, and then the iPad came out and the Apple Watch. And I was there through all of that. It was a fascinating and wonderful time to be there. I loved working at Apple. And towards the end of that, two things happened. Towards the end of my tenure there. Number one is I realized I no longer wanted to climb the corporate ladder at Apple. And there was a couple of reasons for that. I mean, one was, in my mind, climbing the corporate ladder was just more sacrifice, right? I mean, we alluded to this
more
earlier,
work.
This success without sacrifice. And I was like, well, I'm working enough and I'm successful enough, and I no longer want to keep climbing. But that posed a real challenge for me because I described earlier, I was an A student in school and I was always striving for the best and the next thing and moving up. And so when I stripped away this desire to keep climbing the corporate ladder, I was confronted with this question, now what? Right. If I'm not trying to get to the next level, what am I trying to do? What is the impact I'm having? What am I doing? And so that was a real challenge for me. And I swirled in that challenge for a number of years. I knew that I wanted to do something that was meaningful. I wanted to keep growing and achieving success, whatever that meant, but I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what it meant, what success meant. And so that's where I got stuck. I finally broke out of that when I attended a workshop, and it was actually very short. It was only a 20-minute speaker. And inside of this 20 minutes, I got this idea that literally changed the direction of my career.
Wow.
And the idea that I got inside of those 20 minutes was, what if you forget all of the rules that tell you what you can and can't do? So if you didn't worry about what other people would say or what you've done in the past, or whether you have the education or whether you have enough money saved or whether you know the right people, if you didn't worry about any of those different things and you just asked yourself, what would you love to be doing with your time and your energy? What contribution would you like to make? How would you like to be investing yourself in your work in the world? And the answer that came to me in that moment was, I want to talk to people about what matters in life, about what does success mean to them and how to achieve it. And that quickly evolved into becoming a coach. And so I've been a coach kind of, under different monikers. I've been a life coach, I've been a career coach. And right now, most of my work is really around executive coaching or business coaching, helping people accomplish their professional goals in a way that doesn't require sacrifice. But I had to go through that whole journey and to be stuck and to be in this place of uncertainty for years until I finally got that idea inside this 20-minute talk that helped break me out of that.
I love it. I love it. And your book was very interesting. And again, it's called Breaking the Code. Show everybody who is watching this.
Yes.
I was an A student. And so I saw a lot of similarities in it when I was reading it. And my first thought, as I was kind of going through, it was almost like the code was your DNA. This was what you were meant to do, and more importantly, what you were expected to do. Whether it was your family, your partners, your teachers, all of those, it was like, well, you're the good student. You're the perfect student. Therefore, you must do this. You have to go to college. You have to do the, and all of those things. And that really was, and I think so many people see that, they feel like they have to live up to everybody else's expectations. And so I love that you work with executives. And it's obviously it applies to any level of anybody, but the executives in particular, because they have been living that life of this is what you're supposed to be doing for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and they don't have to.
Right. That's absolutely right. My version of that is my dad worked at a big company. He worked at the same company for more than 30 years until he retired from that company.
Right.
And this was back in I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And so, he put on a suit every day and he had a briefcase and he wore his suit and he carried his briefcase to work every day. And so implicitly or explicitly, that became my model of success. And so, it's no wonder that I worked at a company like General Electric or Apple.
Yeah, you put your suit on, you had your briefcase.
Exactly. And so I followed in those footsteps. And so the idea of running my own business, being in charge of my own day, being an entrepreneur, that was really breaking the mold for me. And I'll tell you, it was a scary decision to leave what I knew and go off in this new direction. And so this is what I talk about as the A trap. And it's for A students fall into this A trap because they keep falling back on what they know. And what they believe they should be doing and what people have taught them they should be doing or they're capable of doing, right? I could be the leader of a big corporation. And so I need to put on my suit and carry my briefcase. And I had to break out of that trap in order to actually find a new path and the kind of work that I want to do.
Right. Yeah, I found it interesting in your book where you said, you'd made this decision, but you had trouble telling your dad because it was going to be, but son, Rusty, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're giving up a career at Apple.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for bringing that up. And I actually remember very clearly when I did tell him, and it was after I had made the decision. I had made the decision. I was well down the path. And that's when I finally told my dad. And two things. One is, his eyes got moist. He was a little bit emotional because I was walking away from a great company. Apple is a wonderful company.
Yeah, and they're going to tell you money, benefits, all of those things, which
stability,
that does make sense.
And his model of success was you work at a great company and you stay there. And so for me to walk away from that was really challenging for him.
Right.
And to his credit, he didn't say anything to me. He didn't tell me I was making a bad decision. He didn't try to change my mind. He didn't do anything. And so to his credit, he recognized that what was his values, what was important to him, which, by the way, I had really absorbed in my early life and I had to work through in order to make this change. That's why it was so hard. He recognized that I had my own guidelines and my own set of rules to follow. And I think that is such an important piece. And that's really fundamentally where this idea of breaking the code, where the title of my book comes from, because it's like we've all been programmed. Right. Whether we were, whether that was deliberately, I don't think my dad ever told me you need to work at a big company and stay there forever. But I absorbed it because that's the environment I was in. And we all absorb it, right? Especially smart, motivated, driven, ambitious people. We absorb these messages about what it means to be successful.
Right.
And if you live in that, you're going to be stuck in it. And that's where you have to break the code.
Right. Yeah. I grew up the same way. Now, I'm at the very, very end of baby boomer. So, things were starting to kind of change. So I at least got the benefit of women didn't have to be teachers, nurses, or mothers. And so that was good. And it was expected that I would go to college. I mean, there was never, if I would have said I want a gap year, no. No. But my father had the same job for over 30 years. Now my mom kind of did the combination of part-time, but housewife, but lots of volunteer work, things like that. So she had that very traditional type of thing. And when I decided, 20 some years ago to leave corporate America and go on my own, my father, I mean, it's like your dad, didn't say anything. I think my dad didn't know what to say because he didn't understand when I said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start my own business. That was just so out of his realm of understanding because he worked, for one thing, he was a government employee, but, now he was very proud of me. I mean, but if you had said, Don Gore, what does your daughter do? He would have said, and it was a challenge. And the funny thing is I married someone who has been with the same company since he got out of college. He has, and I mean, that obviously his choice, but the fact that I change and do other things, I think that does kind of perplex him a bit. And it definitely perplexed his family. They were like, now what are you doing? And I think one of the things that I have come across is that so many times people think, oh, it's your hobby and you're going to go back to working for the man. And they just don't understand sometimes that, no, I'm going down this different path.
Yeah. Well, I think finding your path is what's so important. And, I know that a lot of listeners are entrepreneurs and business owners and small business owners. And so, you may not relate to this idea of working for the man, working for the big company and that kind of transition. But the idea of your habitual ways of thinking, what's permissible, what's what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, what you can do, what you can't do. That same idea applies to all of us.
Right.
We all have that same approach, right? As you think about running your business, what are the things that you have to do in order to run your business? How often do you actually think about those and challenge them and even be willing to do an experiment and say, well, what if this thing that I think is sacred, that's so important, what if I didn't do it? Or what if I let somebody else do it instead of I'm being the one who has to do it?
What if I delegate?
Right. Well, and I will tell you that is, as a business owner, as a small business owner, I know the challenge of that. And one of the pieces of advice I got early on, which has been hugely beneficial for me, and I think I need to regenerate this in the new year, is to deliberately have somebody that you can delegate things to. So my business is just me. I don't have a whole team that I work with, but I do have a virtual assistant. And, the piece of the suggestion that was given to me, which I love, is get a virtual assistant and keep asking yourself, what can you give to that person? How can you build a system? How can you build a process so you can give things to another person? So that's just a simple example for most of us as entrepreneurs, right? We believe we're successful because of the value we add to the business. And of course that's true, but there's always things that you're doing that you don't need to be doing.
Right. Yeah. Things that take up our time.
Yes.
Invoicing, dealing with, say you're doing a weekly newsletter, putting that together, all of those things. I mean, so many things are things that other people can handle. And, what I've discovered is, and, I had to fight this myself, was the fact that somebody else not only could do it, they might do it better than me. And I don't know, maybe that comes back to being the A student, type A, all of those things, and realize, like, my producer is a virtual assistant and she does an absolutely fabulous job. We were trying to figure out the other day if we're starting year 4 or starting year 5 together, but obviously quite a long time. And she does do things different than what I would do. And they are better, and it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, getting used to that was a little bit of a challenge.
It is. And so that's perfect that you brought that back to the A students, right? Because, if we all have heard the adage, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And so many A students buy into that, right? Because we're competitive. The reason we're successful is because of the effort we put in, and we're smart and we're hardworking and all of that. It's like, that's great, but that also gets in your way. And so that's one of these things that, especially as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, it's so important to be looking at that and challenging yourself and saying, just keep stretching, pushing the envelope. Where's the next thing that I can let go of and have somebody else take on?
Right. And I love that, millennials have a totally different outlook on a lot of this. And so many times people of my generation are like, oh, millennials, oh, they change jobs every 2 years. They want to be fulfilled. And I tell them, excuse me, you raised them. And of course we did. We raised them because we knew there was more. You don't want to job hop, but you do want to be fulfilled, and you want to work for companies that give meaning. I mean, all of those various things that millennials do that so many of us are just totally perplexed at.
Right. Well, and I think that part of one of our the challenges for many of us is we're not just perplexed by it, but we're judgmental of it.
Right. It's like, well, what do you mean you've changed jobs every 2 years? What's wrong with you?
Exactly. What's wrong with you? It's not right to change jobs every 2 years. You're doing, you're not navigating your career effectively. You're not being responsible. Whatever the story is, or the words that we have that go along with that, it's very easy to be judgmental of others for the way they're navigating. But at the same time, I remember somebody saying, like, oh, these millennials, they want to be fulfilled in their job. And I'm like,
oh, gasp, that's horrible.
I think, don't we all want that, right? Is somehow we've built up this expectation that you have to suffer in your job and you shouldn't even ask for fulfillment. But fundamentally, don't we all want fulfillment? And so I think that's another one of these elements of the A trap, or just our habitual way of working, which is we're used to the ways in which we are uncomfortable, right? I'm okay being uncomfortable suffering through my work, or I'm okay being uncomfortable putting in a lot of extra time and energy and effort in order to get something done. And so we get used to being uncomfortable in certain ways, and we'll keep being uncomfortable in those ways.
Because we know what it's like.
We know what it's like. And so the part of the opportunity is to say, am I willing to be uncomfortable in a different way? Am I willing to be uncomfortable in asking for what I really want? Whether that's the millennial idea of, wanting fulfillment, or as a small business owner, talking to a client or a potential client and say, you're exactly the kind of person that I do great work for. And, I want to work with you.
Right.
Are you willing to ask those kind of things? Are
Mhm.
you willing to network with someone who may seem out of reach,
Mhm.
to make that call, to make a request, or try to connect with somebody
Mhm.
that feels like they're, a little bit beyond your
Mhm.
current sphere? But
Mhm.
are you willing to be uncomfortable enough to take that risk
Right.
and go off and
Mhm.
start that kind of conversation?
Right.
So this is about finding different ways to be uncomfortable
Mhm.
rather than the same ways we've always been
Mhm.
uncomfortable.
Right. And it's funny because our generation is uncomfortable with it. The generations that came after us are like, well, why wouldn't I just, like I was trying to come up with a contact here at Emory University. And I was thinking, oh, okay, I can do LinkedIn, and do I know somebody who could introduce, and blah, 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 I'm almost talking myself out of this, right?
Yeah.
But a younger generation would go, well, I just pick up they wouldn't pick up the phone because they don't do that. But they would say, why are you even hesitating to contact them? I don't understand why. And they would just, and they would figure they're either going to respond or they're not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, and I would still be going, well, now I don't want to bother, all of those things, right?
Well, I think one of the things that you're getting to is fear of failure, fear of rejection,
Mhm.
fear of criticism, fear of judgment,
Right.
all of those things, kind of back to this idea of the A student.
Right.
Right?
Heaven forbid we get a B.
Exactly. And we spent so much of our academic career and then our professional career avoiding those things, right? Avoiding the B, avoiding the criticism, the judgment, the failure, the lost sales opportunity, whatever it is. We spend so much of our time and energy avoiding those uncomfortable situations.
Right.
I really believe that one of the keys to success in business and in life more broadly, but specifically in business, is courage. And courage is not an absence of fear. Courage is not like, oh, I'm not afraid, forget fear. I don't have fear.
Right.
That's not what courage is. Courage is feeling afraid and doing it anyway. Saying, yeah, I'm uncomfortable. I don't know what's going to happen. They might say no. I might get rejected. I might get nothing. I might just be a vacuum, right? No response at all. But I'm going to do it anyway because it's something that I'm interested in and I want.
Right. Right. And I think, the A student thing is, we did whatever it took to get that A. So we kept pleasing people. We didn't question them. I mean, all of those various things. And it really was that, we didn't want to do anything to not get that A. Right. So, we always did whatever they asked us to do, even when we didn't like it or believe it. I mean, there were times where I would answer questions, not math, because math, he's pretty absolute, but English, other types of things where there were different types of answers. But I would always think, what do they want me to say? Right. And I even did that, when I was in corporate America, and they would make us take those silly personality tests, right? That whatever they were. And I never thought, what should I say? I always thought, what do they want me to say? And that is that we have to fit that mold.
Well, and I think what you're talking about is like, I recognize this in myself on a day-to-day basis, right? Even in this conversation, Deb, right? We could be approaching this as like, what should I say? What do they want to hear? What's relevant to the listeners? And those are all important questions. And it becomes this delicate balance of being relevant to your market, being relevant to your customers, talking about the things that they want to say, but bringing your conviction and your point of view to it, rather than thinking I've got to be all oriented towards them, towards my customers. Of course, you want to understand them, but you also want to bring your perspective. And I think for a small business owner, for an entrepreneur, whatever your product or service is, you've got to stand behind it. You've got to really believe in it. And of course, it has to be relevant to your customers. Right. But when you go too far in that direction of just trying to please the other person all the time, that also doesn't work very well.
Well, and that's where we see businesses that fail because they go too far. The client might say, I'm not going to pay that much. But what will you pay? Or, all of these various things. And we bring about the downfall of our business simply because we wanted to please people. And for some reason, we think we shouldn't be making money. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, and what are your goals? because I've started a new business venture, and I said, hello, I want to make money. And I could see them kind of be taken aback. And I said, I can't do what I want to do if I don't make money. It's otherwise it is just a hobby and things like that. But yeah, we and I think especially for women, I see it happen more with women because we want to please people and we're nurturing them where, you tell a client, okay, the cost is 5,000. And they say, well, I can only afford 4,000. And we go, okay. And what we should say is, okay, what are we taking off? Or can we take off,
Sure.
or things like that, what is going to bring it down to the 4,000? I had a new logo designed for this new business venture. Lovely young woman, just out of design school. And I was probably her first paying client. Now she did an invoice. It was very professionally. So I was very impressed by that. But she immediately did I will fix it for free. I will do, and I said, no. And I told her, I said, first of all, I will pay for that. And don't you ever devalue yourself like that again. And I could tell she was a little bit taken aback. And I told her, I said, if you don't value yourself, why am I going to value you?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And, I think many people have this idea that wanting money or liking money is a bad thing.
Right.
And to some degree we understand that, right? Because we've all heard the expressions, money's the root of all evil and so on. But, money really does not, it does not create behavior. It amplifies behavior. So if you have a lot of money and you're kind of a really respectable, generous, kind person, it just creates more opportunities for you to express that. On the other hand, if you have a lot of money and you're selfish and mean and vengeful, it creates opportunities for you to amplify that and to bring more of that into the world. But, if we can come to a different relationship with money and say money is really just a vehicle for expression of yourself in the world, right? To amplify who you are. And if you think about it in that way, it no longer kind of carries the negative connotation of like, well, it's bad to want money. No, of course it's good to want money because it creates the opportunity for you to be your best self and to be the kind of person you want to be in the world.
Right. And the problem comes in when we see the excesses or what we judge to be the excesses. Let me put it that way. Where, like I look at picture, I'm here in Atlanta, you're in Silicon Valley. So a lot of the same stuff, we see these giant mansions. Yeah. And I'm like, it's two of you. Why do you need 15 bedrooms? And for them, that was important.
Yeah.
And there are things that I know I spend money on that people are like, what the heck? Why? And even if it's just something as frivolous as, a new pair of tennis shoes or something, and now my mother, bless her heart. See, I live in the South now. I can say that. She will tell people, she's a child of the Depression and she is Scottish. So, she's frugal, and I will say, I did such and such, and she will, I don't understand that. How can you be so wasteful? Those tennis shoes you could still wear for another 2 months. But my toe was sticking out. I mean, or I just wanted a new pair of tennis shoes. I mean, I shouldn't have to justify that I did that. And especially at my age, but our mothers always have that sway over us, right?
Of course. Well, and that's back to the programming, right? It's back to the code, this idea that like we have this way of walking through the world, of seeing the world and interacting, what we think is okay and not okay and so on. And so, the tennis shoes is a great example, right? That's a very good kind of personal example. I think most people can relate to.
Right.
But we all have it, right? If you think, and even if you think about your business and you think about that same idea in your business and you think about what is your approach to spending money and investing in your business? Right. Are you the kind of person who readily invests in your business because you know that it's going to pay dividends? Or are you kind of person who's very frugal, right? That, child of the Depression, if you will, but I've got to count all of my nickels and dimes and make sure that I'm spending frugal. I'm not spending, that I'm frugal, because that drives profitability. Right. Well, it does, but it also could impact your growth. And so I think, one of the things that's I think is so important is for people to start to pay attention to, where is your bias? we're all biased, right? We're all biased this way or that way. Like, are you biased towards spending money freely? Or are you biased towards being very frugal and penny pinching? And just recognize that, because once you know what your bias is, then you can start to observe yourself and say, am I making this just because it's my habit? Am I buying 20 pairs of tennis shoes because that's what I like to do? And do I really need 20 pairs of tennis shoes? Or am I not buying any and my toe is sticking out? And I'm saying, hey, it's time to invest. So when you recognize your bias, and again, using the tennis shoes example, but it applies to business as well, to be thinking about how do you normally make decisions? And is that serving you? And can you experiment and kind of try to move on that spectrum to a slightly different place and see what happens?
Right. Yeah. And recognizing our bias when we're viewing someone else. I mean, the tennis shoe example is another great one. I have a friend who just graduated from college. So he's 22-ish. And now this kid's going to be one of those millionaire, billionaire people. I mean, but one of the things he buys the designer tennis shoes. And I remember one time, we were with him and he said, yeah, I just spent $600 on a pair of tennis shoes. And I was like, you did what? And he said, I already have a buyer at 900. And I went, oh, okay. I mean, but yeah, I mean, for him, it really was, it was an investment. But it was just, for me, the bias was you wasted that money. And then he very rightly pointed out, oh, no, I didn't. But I think it's so important that when we are looking at other people, we do recognize what our bias is. And then, deal with it that way.
And I think that's such a great example, because if we bring it back into the business world, right? Who would not want to buy something for 600 and sell it for 900?
Right. Doesn't matter what it is.
Doesn't matter what it is. And as a business owner, you say, sign me up. That sounds great. I'd love to do that. And there's plenty of people, right? Like your initial reaction who would say, tennis shoes, $600? You're crazy. You can't spend $600 on tennis shoes. And when you have that mentality, that's your bias, and you've just shut down a part of your business. You've just shut down a business opportunity. So that is just a great, simple way. And just for anyone listening, just pay attention to what was your reaction when Deb told that story. Someone paid $600 for tennis shoes. Is your reaction like Deb's, like, that's nuts, you can't spend that? Or is your reaction like, oh, what a cool idea. You spend 600, you get a buyer for 900. I wonder where those opportunities are for me, right? Because that initial reaction is your indicator. That's showing you where your bias is, and you can learn from that, and you can start to experiment with it.
And of course, what happens is as you said, we shut those things down. Whether it was tennis shoes, whether it was whatever, if I had said, no, you don't do that, then you lost out on that $300 profit. And how many times do we do that in business where, we think about something and we talk ourselves out of it because of our biases.
Absolutely. So and if we go back to the smart, ambitious, driven people,
right?
One of the challenges that we face, especially people formerly A students, recovering A students, one of the areas we can fall into this A trap is we're really smart and analytical. And we can talk ourselves
analytical.
Yes. Over analytical. And we can talk ourselves out of something that we know is a good idea because it's risky. We haven't done it before. It might fail. I'll go back to the story you shared about networking to find somebody at Emory. And all of the hesitations of, well, I don't know what might this person say, and maybe I don't pick up the phone, and so we can talk ourselves out of things. And so that's one of these challenges, that we're overly analytical. And if we can just tune into, hey, there's a part of me that thinks this is a cool idea, and I would love to have it happen.
Right,
I'm going to go for it.
Right, and that's not to say we just jump in. You still want to be thoughtful about it. So, like, the person at Emory that I want to talk to, I wouldn't just say, hey, dude, I would say, I would have this well thought out pitch, basically, for talking to him. And, and again, that sometimes is different with generations also. I remember years ago, I had an employee, and this was when I was in corporate America, who she was our CEO. needed a little script written. He was going to leave a voicemail message for everybody in the company. And so, he just needed it written out. So I gave it to her and made the mistake of not saying, run it past me first. And so she wrote it, she sent it to him sent an email. And I get this phone call and, caller ID. So I, of course, answer the phone differently because it's the CEO who's calling, right? And so I put on my, and I said, this is Deborah. And he doesn't say hello. He doesn't, what he says is fire her. And I went, I mean, I didn't even know what he was talking about. And of course, what she had done was, in essence, sent him what she would do if she was texting friends her age. So it had no punctuation. It had, it had grammatical errors, all of these things, because she was 20, he was in his 50s. I mean, all these various things. And so when I discovered all of that, I said, okay, no, not going to fire her. We're going to use this as a teaching moment. And so I went back to her and I said, okay, my mistake, but for this. And I explained to her, when you're communicating with the CEO of, a very large corporation, you don't start with, hey, dude. But yeah, I mean, it was just, and I think that's part of the biases that come about too, is, we forget that somebody might really, really want to only communicate with text. Somebody else might only want to communicate via phone call, and so we have to adapt to that if we want to work with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've worked with clients who I've had this exact conversation because so many people, and I think business owners follow this too. It's like, we can get so overwhelmed with all the different channels of communication, all the different types of communication. There's so much information and requests coming at us that it can be very difficult to be proactive and say, what do I actually need to do to grow and grow my business to be successful? And so the question that I've asked my clients is, do you know, when you think about the people you work with, do you know what their preferred method of communication is? And they all say yes, right? Because we all know some people respond to email. Some people, you may as well never email them because they'll never respond. Some people you have to call, some people you text, right? But we know this. And I say, well, can't you have your preferred way of communication? And they're like, oh no, I have to respond to everybody on every channel. So it's, again, one of these little pieces of training that we somehow believe that we're unique and that we have to be responsive everywhere, as opposed to saying, hey, this is my preferred way of communication. And there's two ways to go about that. One is just to start doing it that way. And the people who work with you regularly will learn, just like you've learned about them. Oh, wow, Deb is really good on email.
Rusty only wants to be texted.
Exactly. But don't ever bother calling because she'll never pick up the phone. Right? That's hypothetical. I don't know if that's true about you. But so you can just do it, or I've seen plenty of people who have an automatic email response that comes back and says, I only check email once a day. If it's urgent, please text me, or, those kinds of things. Or you could even say, I don't check email regularly. If this is important, please send me a text or a Slack or whatever it is. So you can guide people and shape the way the communication comes into you. And you don't have to be the jack of all trades. You don't have to be everything to everybody. And I think that's one of the ways we were talking about earlier, that it's challenging for people, especially entrepreneurs and business owners, if they think they have to be everywhere all the time. You just can't do it.
Right. At the start, we talked about, success without having to sacrifice whatever it is, and you mentioned being in a band, being outdoors, being with your family. I mean, all of these things. And especially in the last 2.5 years with COVID, I think it certainly seems like so many people are really rethinking that, why am I at this job? And have you found that in the last couple of years, people have really started examining their careers a lot more?
Absolutely. People are asking those questions. And I think COVID just shone a spotlight on it, in part because everything else was stripped away, right? All of the restaurants and the activities you did outside and the hobbies and the movies and all of those things.
We couldn't go on our hiking path behind the house. I was like, what's up with that?
I know. Thankfully, that loosened up as we learned. But, yes, in the early days, we couldn't even go to the parks. The parks were all shut down. So absolutely, as all those things were stripped away, what was left was you're sitting in your house and you're working. And so you've got your family and your work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just got to this question of, oh man, all these things that I always thought were required, now I'm not doing, like getting dressed up in the morning and putting on the suit and the briefcase, right?
Shoes.
Going into the office, the commute, all of that kind of stuff just disappeared. And it just opened up this question. Well, if all these things I thought were required are no longer required, then what about all these other things that I think are required? Are they really required? And we've seen that in the last couple of years as this whole idea of returning to the office has played out. Because companies want people to come back. Yeah, they say that's required. You're required to be in the office. And employees are saying, well, is that really required? Because I prefer not to commute.
I got my work done and I wasn't in the office.
Right. And so that is definitely playing out. And it's just related to this bigger question of, what's it all for? What am I doing? And that's where this idea of success without sacrifice comes from. Certainly if you want to grow a business, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur and you've got ambitions to keep growing your business, that takes time and energy. There's no question about that. We all know that it takes your time and energy. The question is that time and energy a sacrifice or not? And that is that's where you have to ask the questions. Because if you feel like you're not getting the time with your family, you have no hobbies, all you do is work and eat and sleep, then that's a challenge. So one of my clients, I remember telling me in our initial conversation, he said he had not been to the doctor in 5 years because he didn't have time.
Whoa.
Right. It's just, and so one of the things is like very simple. He's like, hey, I like part of the reason I'm having these conversations is because I want to take better care of myself. Right. That includes going to the doctor, but it's exercising, it's getting out and doing some fun things, socializing, and so on. And through the course of the work that we did together, he added those things into his life. So he made it to the doctor. He started playing golf more regularly, which for him was entertainment, but it was also exercise.
But he was networking too, I'm sure.
Yes. But the result of all of this was he became more effective at work because he delegated more. He made decisions faster. He had a better perspective because he wasn't in the weeds all the time. He was able to zoom out because he got out of work periodically. And the result of all of this was he ended up more successful at work. He got a promotion opportunity. And he was happier because he wasn't spending all of his time and energy at work. And so that's where this idea of success without sacrifice comes from. And it worked for business owners too, because we just get sucked into the day-to-day grind. And as we've talked already about delegation and so on, it's being able to zoom out and pull out of some of those things. And you can actually be more successful and have more time to invest in the things that are important to you.
Yeah, I remember, several months ago, the whole Tom Brady, Giselle, divorce thing. And somebody interviewed Giselle and they, and they were like, well, but he's bringing home lots of money. He's famous, blah, 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 blah. And, they go through that big list. And I mean, yes, he is. Now I'm a Colorado person, so I have John Elway and I have Peyton Manning and, so, but he was, extremely successful. And I remember she said, I just wanted him home.
Yep.
And that was what it came down to, and now granted, I think she actually has more money than him, but, all of these various things, but yeah, it was, he had all of those other things, but she just wanted him home.
Well, and I think that's part of this idea of success without sacrifice is to take the time to define what is success. It's so easy to just adopt the definition that is given to us through media and society and social media.
Yeah, we have to have 2.5 kids. We have to have the 14-bedroom house. I mean, all of those things.
Exactly. And to really get clear for yourself about what is success, because so many people will say, and, I use Tom Brady as an example. I don't know if this is the case for him or not, but hey, I will be home and I will do all those other things once I'm successful, once I have reached these milestones.
But you always keep going.
Yes.
Got to hit that next milestone.
And that's exactly what Tom Brady's story is, right? How many years has he been on the cusp of retirement, or he retires and he comes back into the game? And, but think about that in your own life. Think about, do you have a finish line, right? So many of us think about retirement as this finish line. Like, hey, once I've got financial success and independence and I'm
then
stable,
we'll travel, then we'll,
yes, then I will do all those things. Well, just again, turn that around and say, is that success for you? Is it worth sacrificing all of those things now and delaying them? We're all taught the value of delayed gratification. I get that. But to what degree, right? Can you incorporate some of those things into your life now and enjoy your life more along the way? So just two simple examples of that. And one of those is this concept that I heard years and years ago. I heard this idea. Somebody said, I'm not going to retire at the end of my career. I'm going to retire throughout my career. And the idea was this person would work for 5 years and then take a year off. And then go back and work for 5 years and then take a year off. So why wait until the end of your life when you're older and when your kids aren't around and all this to quote unquote enjoy life? Why not enjoy it along the way?
Right.
So I was intrigued with that. I thought it was such a great idea, and I never had the guts to do it when I worked in the corporate world.
Right.
Because
you think my job's not going to be there.
Sure. Well, and that job may not be there, but another job will.
Right.
But I never had the guts to do that. But what I have started to do is all of these things that have been on my list of things I wanted to do. I've just decided how I want to start doing those things now. Right. So, travel ideas, places that or experiences that I've wanted to have. And I said, rather than say, someday I'm going to go do that, pick one and say, plan it for this year and just put it on the calendar.
Right. And I love the example that you're setting for your son, because you are showing him that, this is an option. I mean, it might not be what he wants to go with because like you said, we all make all of the decisions ourselves, but he is seeing there is a different way to do this.
Well, and I think that's important. I was actually talking about this with someone earlier today. And there's two kind of common examples that I see a lot of people setting. One is work, 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 devote everything to work, put all of your time and energy into that. And is that the kind of example you want to set for your family? Right. So I remember when I was a child, I was a little bit like Giselle saying, I just want my dad around, right? He worked very hard. He was very successful in his career by all kind of external means. And my preference was, geez, I wish he was around a little bit more.
And that's always what the kids are going to say. I just wanted dad, mom to be there.
Of course, of course. But the other example that I see is people who are in jobs, maybe, working hard, but they're not thrilled with it. Right. So I described the end of my tenure at Apple where I said, hey, Apple's a great company. I could stay here for a long time, but I'm not sure what it means to me anymore. And so, what does your work mean to you? Is it just about turning the crank and bringing home a paycheck? Or is there something a little bit more to it? Because if it's just turning the crank and bringing home a paycheck, that's also an example you're setting for your children.
Right.
And I just used my own example of how strongly I was influenced by what I saw around me. And we all are as kids. Right. And so to think about what is the example you're setting in your relationship to work? And I don't think, we talk about work-life balance, and I actually don't like that idea because
that's 50-50. And I tell people no, it's never going to be that. It's
never 50-50. And you never achieve it. Work-life balance is dynamic. It's, you're never on balance. You're always a little bit this way or a little bit that way. And so this idea is finding this dynamic state. And you'll swing around, and sometimes you'll find yourself working a lot and say, I feel like I'm missing out at things at home. Other times you might swing the other way and be like, I've really been enjoying my life and doing a lot of great things, but I've kind of neglecting work. I've got to adjust again. And it's being willing to be in that dynamic state and to continue to find the pathway for you that's right. So you're incorporating some of the beauty of life now, and you're not saying, I'm going to do all of that once I've achieved X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah. And like we were saying, COVID was one of those wake up calls.
Yeah.
I got one of those wake up calls in 2015 when the doctor said, hey, you have cancer. And I went, ugh. And I literally looked at my doctor and said, I'm sorry, that's not on my schedule. And she hadn't dealt with me enough to know that I was just going to be one of those wackadoodle patients. But yeah, it was like, no, that's not on my schedule. And, but through the course of that, I realized, okay, first of all, I'm not going to be around toxic people. That is one of the things. And, if it's, to definitely to do the things now that, you don't want to put off because you don't know what's going to happen. And so it's, but yeah, COVID was that too, where people, when they were home, especially when they were home with the kids and all of those things, it was like, oh my gosh, a lot of people were like, I got to go back to the office. But, they really did think, there is more to life than just having my job.
Absolutely. So, just as you were saying that, I'm just reminded, I don't think we've talked about this, but I want to share for the listeners just 2 tools that I think are kind of simple, but really profound in helping to accomplish a lot of what we're talking about here. And it's C&C, and it stands for coffee and calendar. So the coffee, first of all, the idea with it's not just the caffeine, it's not the experience of drinking coffee, but it's the coffee break. Because we can get so nose down in our work, right? And I've been this way where I'm working and I'm saying, hey, I really want to go out for a walk. Oh, just this last 2 emails or just this last,
And then it's dark.
And you've missed the walk. But I mean, I would ask the listeners to raise their hand, but I'm sure you've all had that experience where there's something that you want, but you don't do it because you keep putting it off. So the purpose of the coffee break is to take a break, to get some perspective, walk away from work for a few minutes. And it needs to be a decent sized break, at least 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, could be even be an hour, an afternoon, whatever is right for you, but to get some distance from work and to ask these, to be thinking about multiple questions, like what do you want to accomplish in your life at large? What are some of those things that maybe you've been putting off that it's time to pull into your current calendar and schedule? And then also, what are some of the things in your job, in your work, that you can be doing differently, that you could be adding in things, that opportunities that you haven't pursued because you're so busy with other things? What are some of those kind of game changer things? So that's the purpose of coffee. It's the coffee break, to get some distance, because we were saying earlier how we're bombarded with ideas and content and requests and messages that come at us all the time. Part of the coffee break is to step away from that, to get away from it, turn it off, give yourself some quiet to listen to what comes from inside of you. That's the coffee. Then the second part is the calendar, which is very simple. It's like, put it on your calendar.
Right.
Most of us
I have a friend that puts walk the dog twice a day on his calendar. Yeah. He would walk the dog no matter what, because the dog is there going, hello, hello. But by having it on his calendar, it makes him do it.
Yeah. And that's great. So the calendar can be useful for those day-to-day routine things. I've had exercise on my calendar. I took it off my calendar because I was like, well, I don't always do it at that time. And then, you know what? I'm not exercising as much. So just the simple reminder of having it on there, even if you move it, even if your timing shifts a little bit, it's really useful for the day-to-day things like walk the dog and exercise. But it's incredibly powerful for those one-off kinds of things, like the vacation you've been wanting to take, or the person you wanting to reach out to at Emory, or the business opportunity you want to pursue, to actually schedule those things on your calendar. Because for most of us, we get that idea on the coffee break, right? When we're out for a walk, when we're on in a conversation, the idea comes to us. We're like, oh, that's something that would be really powerful in my business. I want to do that. And then we don't do it. Right. It might be on a to-do list somewhere. Maybe we capture the idea, but we don't get to it. It's on a
sticky note. Then now you don't even know what it says.
Exactly. And we don't do it because we didn't take that second step and put it on the calendar. And it's because most of us think, well, most of us are pretty good as small business owners, especially if you work in the corporate world, but even in the small business world or entrepreneurial world, we're pretty good at following what's on our calendar. But we forget that we decide what's on our calendar. And it's taking advantage of that and putting the things on your calendar that matter to you, that are going to make a difference in your personal life and your business life, and then doing them. It's pretty simple.
And it's and doing them, that's the important part. Because, just putting it on the calendar and then pushing it another month, pushing it another month, pushing it a year, that doesn't do any good.
No. And in fact, as you're thinking about the calendar, especially if it's the business opportunities that you're wanting to pursue, I highly recommend that you do it in the next 7 to 10 days. right? The sooner the better. When you get the idea, take action on it. Do it, right? There's already some energy and some momentum building because you've got this idea. Follow through on that. And I'll one of the things that I did for over a year was I took cold showers every morning. And most people will say, you're crazy for a cold shower. And it was miserable. And pretty much every one of those 365 days, I stood there with the cold water running and had to talk myself into
why am I doing this?
Yeah. Why am I doing this? Maybe just this once I'll do it, or I'll take a warm shower, whatever. It was challenging pretty much every day. But one of the things that I learned from that, and I still occasionally take cold showers, is a willingness to tolerate the discomfort. And recognizing, first of all, it's not nearly as bad as I think it's going to be. And second of all, it ends.
Right.
And if I can remember those two things when it comes to that thing that I scheduled on my calendar, one, it's not nearly as bad as I think it's going to be. And two, it's going to end. And actually, I'll add a third, which it feels pretty good once you're done.
Right.
If you remember those three things, you don't even have, you can skip the cold showers if you want, but those three important lessons they're going to help you to actually take action on these things.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Rusty, we are almost at the top of the hour. This has been such a fun conversation. We have to continue it because I didn't even get through all my notes. And so we just need to do that. Tell people, how to reach you and what are the services that you provide. And then of course you have your book. Yeah.
So, the best way to reach me is email rusty@rustygaillard.com, or my website is rustygaillard.com. And I believe that will be in the show notes, right? Because the spelling of my last name is a little tricky. So that's the best way to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn all the time, so you can also find me there. Really, the primary service I provide is one-on-one leadership coaching and executive coaching. So I help people grow their business. I help people succeed in their career. But that always starts with, what does success look like for you, right? Because we all have challenges. We all have things that we want. We all have things that aren't working. So I start my work with, let's dig into that. Let's understand it. And then let's craft a picture of success together. And then we'll go off and implement it. But all along the way, we're going to be talking about breaking the code. Again, the title of my book, because we have the reason if you knew how to do this, you would be doing it. Right. And same is true for all of us. So it's finding those things that are standing in our way and removing them. And so again, this is part of this idea that you can have success without sacrifice, because it's not about doing more. It's not about you're already working 60 hours a week, and now you got to go to 70, you got to get 80, and you got to wake up at 5 a.m. and you've got to take cold showers, whatever it is. It's not all about that. It's about, what are the things that are standing in your way? And when you can remove the stuff that's in your way, then you can achieve the success. You can achieve your goals. Right. And so that's that. I think that's an important element of this is it's not all about more. It's actually about less, and finding the things that you can remove so that you can be successful.
Right. And remembering that it's your life. It's nobody else's life.
Right. Absolutely. It's your life. You get to live it the way you want, and you get to define success and what matters to you. And that's really fundamentally, I love that element of it. And it goes way beyond the business results and the personal results that my clients have achieved. And it just gets to this sense of freedom. You get to define your life and live your life the way you want to. And I'm a big supporter of that kind of achievement and what I'll call as real success for people.
I love it. I love it. Well, Rusty, this really has been absolutely fascinating. And like I said, I can't wait to continue this conversation. But until then, do you have any other final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I do. I guess one final thought is I hope that each of you listening would give yourself the gift of 15 minutes, 20 minutes of coffee break, but deliberately with the intention of breaking the code. Right? What if the rules no longer applied? What if somebody gave you a lantern that you could rub and a little genie came out and you got 3 wishes? What would you be wishing for? What are those kinds of results that are beyond the things that you think maybe you can achieve or are reasonable to achieve, but the things you really want? And so my hope for people is to give yourself the gift of that time, to think about it, and then to know that you can absolutely achieve those things. And I would be happy to help you in that if would be useful.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have been having such a delightful conversation with Rusty Gaillard. He is the author of Breaking the Code, Stop Looking for Answers and Start Enjoying Life. And I want to keep adding those taglines on there because that is so important. And I am Deb Creer. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.